Welkom terug by die groot ontbyt. As deel van Familiedag, kyk ons gesels vanmôre ons net oor familie. Gesels ons vanmôre met Lesley Ann van Selm. Sy is die van die organisasie Khulisa Social Solutions. En ons praat vanmôre spesifiek oor die werk wat hulle doen om kwesbare kinders te bemagtig. En ons praat oor gesonde families, samehorige families en wat 'n gesonde familie beteken in 'n gemeenskap en vir kinders in ons land. Good morning, Lesley.
Good morning.
It's lovely having you here this morning on Family Day, the day that we focus on family. Perfect. First, let's talk about Khulisa. Let's talk about what do you do, where did you start, in a nutshell?
In a nutshell, I am the founder and managing director of Khulisa Social Solutions. We turned 27 years old in May of this year. And what Khulisa does, even though it's evolved over time, is that we work in geographic ecosystems like communities, and we take a particular geographic area and we look at what NGOs exist in that area, what different community entities do, and by researching, find out what problems exist in that particular area. We then look at promoting social cohesion by linking the needs of the communities to the assets in the communities, and that will include corporate investment, it will include government policies, and then we try to uplift the communities to actually address their own community needs.
That's great, because sometimes there is a bit of a disconnect between NGOs and reaching funding, and it's great to hear that Khulisa is actually stepping into that gap and filling that role.
Indeed, it is, and there's such a problem with organizations and government departments working in silos.
Yes.
And because of that fragmentation, little is actually achieved. We look at the billions and billions that are spent, for example, on GBV, and all the policies which have actually been developed around GBV, nothing has worked. There's no evidence. It's increased 5% per annum. And that's because there's no cohesion. So our job is really trying to break down what the real needs are and trying to bring together and weave together different community elements in an ecosystem in order to leverage impact.
As the person that works in these communities and throughout your research and speaking to communities, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that face families in South Africa?
Inequality, unemployment, poverty. We actually think that 25% of the people in this country are living off pensions income.
25%.
25%. And that's basically unemployment. So the challenges our families face is, our children are born in such dysfunctionality, the unemployment, the environmental conditions, you've got 10 to 15 people sometimes living in a shack, all these people dependent on their grannies for food. 25% of our children are actually food impoverished. So when you don't have the right nutrition and you don't have the love and the support and the amount of gender-based violence, at least 50% of our families have gender-based violence. So our children are being brought up with being hungry, being deprived of love, so much violence, so much toxicity. The environment is so polluted. And so we just find these adverse childhood experiences following these children right through their lives. And it's by the time they reach, pubescence, they look for love in the wrong places and start getting involved in substances. And, we then start saying, children commit crime and they're the criminals, but we don't realize that there's a causal factor behind it. And that's why we really, really need to start looking at how we start addressing these fundamental problems at such an early age that are framing our children.
That's the biggest challenge.
Absolutely.
How are we going to address these issues? Coherent families, strong family bonds. How are you going to promote that practically?
It's us. It's our collective responsibility.
That's right, yes.
Absolutely. We have to look at, the ecosystem. We have to look at, the community at large. Is how do we systemically, as a collective, start looking at how we address families and how we support families and how we start, fostering a sense of responsibility amongst, fathers to be
especially
good
fathers, yes.
Absolutely. And only half our children in this country live with both parents anyway. And then we've got the grannies bringing the children up and the grandparents. So we really need to take a collaborative approach and start saying, how can we create cohesive families? How can we have surrogate grandparents where children might be living alone even, and start training them and fostering a sense of collective responsibility where we can start supporting each other, helping with homework, looking at therapy, looking at support services for children, and most importantly, giving the children somewhere to go in the afternoons where they can get stimulated and get recreation and extra homework support. We interviewed 15,000 children over the past, I would say, 4 years to find out what would your best life look like. And out of 15,000 children, there were 6 needs that came up with. They want somewhere to go and play. They want somebody to support them with education. They want a role model. They want somebody who can say, I love you. And they want to go out and have fun. And you say, what's going wrong in this country of all the money that's been spent in so many, areas? Why are these children still asking for somewhere to go and play, somewhere to have fun, a role model? So we really have to do a lot of, thinking and looking at the research needs. We know what the needs are, but we've got to look at how we start applying our collective wisdom and how we start investing in ways that we know will have an impact on the status quo around this country.
I find that incredibly sad that that one of the needs is that someone says, I want someone to say I love you. I think, we don't always realize the circumstances in which people are growing up in, and then we do tend to judge the actions later on, but we have failed our own communities and our own people. We have failed them, we as South Africans, and it's not just the government. I think as a collective, like you said, we have failed our own people. If someone goes, my basic need is to want to play and hear I love you and someone to do education with me. I mean, it absolutely breaks my heart, and I think we also take for granted, some of us, that what we have and what our kids have, and we're not always even aware of the circumstances of other people, and that's something we really do need to correct and reach out. It really is upsetting to hear that. But you guys at Khulisa have done wonderful work. What are some of the initiatives and programs that you guys have launched?
The most effective work that we do is really around restorative justice and peacemaking, running dialogues, because dialogue is such a wonderful way for people to find a safe space to talk about issues that they would never normally talk about. And when they are in this safe environment, we start finding that people start letting go of emotional issues that they would never normally have revealed. So dialogue, restorative justice, intervening where there's conflict, training community members to go and deal with conflict at the time it arises, creating a space for parents and children to actually unpack what their challenges are, and then upskilling parents, because parents often come from brokenness themselves, and they have never really learned to unlearn their anger and their own aggression. So parenting skills is really, really important. And even in some of the creches where we've done research, is that 62% of our toddlers are already being aggressive and bullying, and practicing a young juvenile form of gender-based violence in our creches. So again, is this learned behavior is coming up at such an early age. So we really got to start looking at what's causing this, unless we look at the factors that cause it, not throwing all the money at the symptoms, because that's really what's happening. We're throwing money at substance abuse and GBV, but we don't realize this is a manifestation of a far deeper causal factor, and that is what we are hungry, we don't have jobs, we have no self-esteem, and this is why we're playing out all this aggression and anger to our children in our workplace, in our own community. So it's complex, and it's very, a very systemic approach that we really need to take.
I can only imagine if I'm someone and I live in horrible circumstances where I don't have running water and I hardly have electricity, and I have to wake up 3 hours before I have to get to work to try and find some way to get to work, and I'm looking after a household of 7 people, and I go and I get minimum wage, and I work whole day and I come back. I do not have time or patience to take care of the 7 people in my house because, again, I'm walking in like darkness. I'm scared of my safety. There is nothing that I have. I'm maybe eating like one meal or sharing one meal with 7 people. And we cannot blame people for then being almost aggressive and frustrated with their circumstances. And like you say, it really starts with that job creation, people's self-worth. And if you create a place where people actually feel like worthy of just being, they will be different in their actions and they will be proud of what they do, and that will filter through to their families and how they treat their families with love and respect. But we really have created, I think, a society where we've got people that just feel nothing. They just numb.
You've encapsulated it all, really. That's exactly what happens. And then also us, in the workplace, we might have an employee who might come to work and is a little bit dejected or a little bit late, but we didn't again realize exactly what you said.
The reality.
The reality of the snow over the weekend, having to catch a taxi, the taxi's been late, and suddenly, you're at work and you're disciplined for being late, but don't realize the trauma that people have to go through to actually just have a job and to keep their jobs and then still sustain their family. So it's hard out there. It really, really is.
What can we as a community do? What can we as a collective do to not only foster stronger family bonds, but also to support people that are in these situations, that come from these situations?
We need to have discussions. We need to start showing the realities. There's so few South Africans who actually really have walked in the shoes of other people, who really understood exactly what you described so eloquently, who really understand what people are going through. So I think we need to take a deep breath and start looking behind the scenes, looking at some of the data, looking at the stats, looking at what pensions are going through, and start realizing that we all have a role to play in trying to mitigate the poverty and the circumstances and the inequality in our country, the haves and the have-nots. If those who have really had to take time to look at what they could do with their old clothes, with a little bit of extra money they have, and stop investing it in what's needed, not what they think is needed, like throwing money at something that's
cell phones
is already, absolutely. But we all have a role to play, and it's amazing how a little bit can go such a long way. And also our NGOs in our country, there are so many invisible NGOs who are doing the work because, no one else is doing it, but they are capable of becoming significant employers, but also because they're not compliant, they're not getting the right funding. We need to support our NGOs at grassroots level. And again, we've done all the research to show what their needs are. Let's look at supporting NGOs to uplift them so that they can become relevant and impactful.
Sure. That is lovely. Thank you so much for being here this morning, Lesley. And I think we can all just become a little more sympathetic, show a little more empathy, and just become a little more actively involved in our communities. Thank you for being here this morning and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And enjoy Heritage Day.
We are definitely going to. Thank you very much. Lesley Ann van Selm van Khulisa Social Solutions. Interessant nie, as elke net so 'n bietjie meer uit ons eie wêreldjie uitstap, net so 'n bietjie terugstaan en net 'n bietjie vir ander mense ook simpatie hê, gaan dit al klare verskil maak.